This is Leaders Who Scale, and I'm Jeff Siegel. I've worked with thousands of companies over the years, and I'm fascinated by seeing how many of them grow and scale. Join me as we learn from the leaders of growing companies and share that knowledge. Leaders Who Scale is sponsored by Siegel Solutions, providing world-class accounting, advisory, and QuickBooks and Acumatica Cloud ERP services. Today's guest has ownership in businesses in 6 different industries, spread over 60 locations nationwide, generating more than $50 million in annual revenue. He's an acquisition authority. He specializes in buying and holding simple businesses that are easy to understand, at least 10 years in business, and they generate between $1 and $5 million a year in owner earnings, and they have stable management. He doesn't get into turnaround situations. So he owns locations of European Wax Center, Plato's Closet, Disc Replay, My Salon Suite, and Superior Fence and Rail. I want to welcome Nick Leja. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming on and love to hear your story and some of the challenges that you have with doing what you do.
Sure.
So the first thing I ask is, typically, I ask, what's the most challenging aspect of scaling a company? You have multiple companies. So really, what is your biggest challenge in doing what you do?
Probably my biggest challenge doing what I do, whenever I buy a new company, that comes with it a slew of problems, new team members to work through, new challenges, and a bunch of different things. And there's an incredible amount of work. So I think kind of 2 things come to mind when it comes to scaling or buying new businesses that I focus on. One, and I'm sure you've heard this from many people you spoke with, it's all about the team members, just getting the right people in the right seats, giving them the right incentives. Instead of motivating people, hire self-motivated people, then basically just stay out of their way and make sure you don't demotivate them. So I don't think there's any secret to the people aspect of it. The second aspect I do is I try to prevent myself from getting into a trap of checking boxes. So I try to make it so I have nothing to do all day. It's kind of like my goal. So I try to reduce, if I'm getting emails all the time, text messages, phone calls, which usually happens as soon as I buy a business, obviously I address them. And then I usually take it a step further and I try to figure out, okay, how can I prevent this phone call from happening, this email from being sent? What are some ways that I can streamline things and make it easier? Because if I am a slave to my phone and my inbox and text messages, and if I can't step away for 4 hours with a bunch of fires burning, I'm not really going to be able to think strategically, find the next acquisition, find ways to improve the business. I'm just going to be kind of like, caught on the front line. So I have an engineering background. So I really just try to systematize things and streamline things and prevent myself from getting into a checkbox type of mindset.
How involved do you actually get with the companies that you purchase? Obviously there's multiple companies that you right now are an owner of. And right. Like we mentioned earlier, you're looking for stable management already. So you don't want to jump into this role of, working in the company, making all the major decisions. I'm
right.
Just curious how involved you are in that aspect of these companies that you own.
As soon as I acquire a business, I'm very heavily involved. So typically, like my first month of taking over a business, my first priority is the team. So I try to schedule one-on-ones with all the team or as many of the team members as possible. I try to understand what are the roles, what do they like about the job, what do they not like about the job. Most importantly, what are some of their pain points in the current company that they don't like that I can alleviate? And then I definitely make a list of those action items. Because my first thing, I'm trying to build trust with the team. I'm trying to get them to trust me to trust them, and just kind of understand how that all works. Usually the second month, I focus on the processes. I try to understand, with whatever the company is selling or doing, what are all the different touch points with the customers and employees and vendors, and how does that all flow through, to find ways to systematize things, streamline them, and make things more efficient. And then month 3, I'm very involved in taking actions. I feel if I just come in and talk the talk but don't walk the walk, that's a quick way to lose trust with the staff. So in month 3, all those pain points that the team members address, anything that I can fix, I try to fix those really quickly to improve their quality of life, streamline processes, et cetera. So the first 3 months, I'm very heavily involved. And then my goal is I try to find like the right person to put in charge of the company. And maybe it's somebody who's already there. I mean, that's my preferred situation. I don't like bringing in outside management necessarily. I'd rather just kind of stick with the current employee, the current culture, if it makes sense. And then I just really lock arms with them. And one of the things that I found that has allowed me to step back from the business is giving them a very, very good, lucrative incentive that ties them to treat the business more like an owner versus an employee. And I figured once I do that, when you get a passionate, motivated person in the driver's seat with a strong incentive tying into the profitability of the company, then I can just step away and just be there for support, and great things happen.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Is the existing owners typically, are they already like, are they moving out? And you're going in a situation where, like you said, you meet with a team and trying to figure out who's going to be the next leader, or does a owner typically stick around for a length of time and kind of work with that person or that team to kind of bring the next leadership team in, from internal?
Yeah, good question. And all of the acquisitions that I've done, the owner's been retiring. So the owner, they were around for a couple of weeks just to kind of help answer questions and things like that. But then beyond that, it was just kind of me and the team, and we just went from there.
Have you gotten involved in any situations where you have had to kind of really roll up your sleeves and, you thought maybe, well, we've got team members and, I could kind of step out after month 3, but really I've got to stick around a lot longer, just kind of make sure this thing's going in the right direction?
Yeah, there was one business I bought. It was a Plato's Closet store, which is a retail store that buys and sells clothing. And customers are pretty important to any business. And I remember for my first meeting when I went in there, a phone call came in from a customer during the meeting, and the staff ignored it for the first time. The customer called back in, and the staff picked up the phone, kind of rolling their eyes. And the customer wanted to come in and sell their clothes. And the employee said that they're busy the next 2 weeks, call back later, then hung up on the customer. So I'm like, okay, this is not a really good culture. So that was one. That one definitely took more than 3 months. And unfortunately, just the culture was so toxic. The team members were just burnt out. That the ship was so far sunk, it was kind of hard to resuscitate it. So that was one situation where I did bring in people from my other stores and kind of in my current organization to help it and we grew that one up. That's definitely not my preferred method, but that one did take a little bit more time just because of how bad the culture was.
Yeah. Interesting. So do you go into these acquisitions with an exit already kind of in your mind? Like, do you look at it like, hey, in 5 to 7 years or less, I want to, exit this company, or are these long-term plays?
These are all long-term plays. I definitely am more of a buy and hold investor. To me, if I'm buying something with the intent of exiting it in 3 to 5 years or whatever, I'll get a bunch of money, but then I've got to work to find a new investment to put that money into, then to sell it in 3 to 5 years. And that's just a lot of work. And I just kind of like just to buy something that I think is going to be around for 10 to 15, 20 years and really hold it for the long term, which I think is an advantage because some sellers, not all, that's very important for them. They've been building their business for their entire life, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and they want to sell to somebody who's going to kind of steward what they built and continue on their legacy versus just buying something with the intent of flipping it. So I've never sold a business to date. I'm not saying that I would never do it, but I'm definitely looking for a buy and hold.
Okay. All right. Is it just you, or do you have like a small team that helps you kind of assess opportunities, do due diligence? Like, what does that whole process look like?
It's kind of a mixture. There are some businesses when I'm a sole owner and I'm the one just doing it. I prefer working with partners. I've got a really good partner based out of Illinois. I've got another great partner based out of Louisiana. So I have a couple of different partners around and another one in Texas. So kind of a blend. But I would say, for most businesses, especially the bigger ones, I would work with partners and investors.
Okay. Yeah. Do you, just from a financial aspect, do you have like one holding company where you have everything kind of rolled into as investments, or do you have LLCs of some kind? Or yeah.
Yes. So right now everything is its own individual entity, just mainly because the ownership structure is different in the vast majority of the company. So it's something I've thought about, and at one point I might work to, but as of right now, they're all separate.
Okay, cool. And how do you actually go about assessing opportunities? Do you have I know in your LinkedIn, you explain kind of what you're looking for, but do you actually actively, promote that you're looking? What's that look like? Do you have just deal flow coming in? Because it sounds like you're doing most of it yourself, right?
Right.
So I'm just curious what that looks like. Is it word of mouth, or is that something that you actively promote somehow?
Yeah, and this is definitely one of my current biggest challenges is finding the opportunities. So a lot of it is just word of mouth, talking to people, networking, relationship building. Whenever I talk with people, I just say, hey, I'm looking for businesses. Do you know of anybody who has a business of this size they're looking to sell? I feel like right now there's a large opportunity with, as a lot of baby boomers age and look to sell their businesses. There's a lot of owners I feel in this spot where they want to sell their business to somebody trustworthy, not necessarily just like an investment firm that's going to exit in 3 to 5 years, but they don't really know where to go. And the thought of like hiring a broker, then getting a bunch of just people, potential some tire kickers reaching out for them, sending out their financials, like it's a very emotional process, a very personal process.
Yeah.
So I feel like I definitely have something to offer with that, but it's making myself known. So that's currently one thing that I'm really focusing on through my LinkedIn or my current networks and relationships, is putting the word out there to kind of make those connections happen.
Yeah. I mean, we because we do outsourced accounting, we have a fair number of clients that come to us and they're thinking on selling. And
Okay.
we do a lot of where we get the numbers cleaned up, because some of these companies, I'm not sure if you look at some of these, they're small business, not small, but like they're not audited, not compiled numbers. They just do the tax return every year, and good businesses, but they're not like, you really can't print a good set of financials out because they got personal expenses flowing through. So you kind of have to normalize the numbers and say, well, how much of that is really your car and how much is that are we paying for your family's
Right.
meals and things like that. So we see a lot of that stuff. And you probably do you do a lot of that due diligence when you're looking at companies financials where you're trying to pull out, well, what is the real earnings for this owner or this entity? Is it something that you spend a lot of time yourself doing?
Yep. Yep. I do that a lot.
Yeah.
I'm pretty familiar with that.
Yeah. So, because we end up having to do it for the owners. They may be on a cash basis, but the numbers look kind of weird because of it's a cash base. So
Right.
we're trying to convert it to accruals, show like what is the real gross margins.
Right.
You can't present numbers showing like a very high margin one month and no margin the next. You went to cash, or you went out and bought a bunch of whatever it was for the next 6 months, and it sits on the P&L and as a cost, and you're like,
Right.
read that. So definitely see a lot of that stuff.
But yeah, keep me in mind if you see anything that you think might be a good fit for me. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, we could talk offline. I know a couple of clients that we're working with now to clean up the numbers to sell,
Okay.
both in pretty decent, industries and simple to understand. I know that's what you're looking for. They're
Yeah, I'm
not
not super smart, so
manufacturers. Yeah. It sounds like, you don't want like a manufacturer who has to buy and sell inventory and put a lot of effort into it with job shops and stuff. That's probably a lot more challenging.
correct.
And
Yeah, most likely.
um, do you spend a lot of time ahead of time with even the team? Because you mentioned the management, culture, that sort of thing. So when you're looking at these opportunities, some people are very driven by the numbers, which you need to look at numbers anyway, obviously. But I know there are some people that spend a lot more time, like you mentioned earlier, on culture. Is it the right team? Am I going to be able to work with these people? Is that you spend a lot of time with doing that, or just as you're reviewing these clients or companies?
Yeah, as much as I can. It's somewhat of a delicate dance because from a lot of seller standpoint, they don't really want their staff knowing they're selling necessarily. So they don't. It's tough to really introduce myself and things like that. That happened one time with the business, and unfortunately, the deal fell through at the 11th hour after I had been introduced as the owner. So that kind of was a not super great experience. But anyways, as much as possible, I'd like to do that. That is challenging with some sellers. So I try to get there as best as I can. What's most important for me is really just whoever the top guy is going to be. So like if they have a manager that's been with them for 15 years, like one question I always ask sellers, is there somebody in your current company who I could give some sweat equity to and make them actual part owner alongside me, who's been with the company for a long time and yada, yada, yada. And then if the answer is yes, that person I definitely want to meet with, have several meetings with and really understand what is that person like? What motivates them? Do we resonate with my core values, their core values? I spend a tremendous amount of time validating that because to me, that's the most important thing. And then everything else I do as much as I can. But I feel like as long as like the business makes sense, the fundamentals are there, and my right-hand person, we're in sync, then we can overcome pretty much any challenge that comes.
How often do you actually are you in communication with the companies? Is this like a daily thing where you do check-ins and things like that? Because there's six different ones and they're spread out, and you have probably multi-location type entities. So is this something where you know on a daily basis what's happening at each company, or is it a little less?
So I read a book called Traction, and we used the EOS model. I think you mentioned that you use that as well in your company. And that has definitely saved me a tremendous amount of time. So, with that, we have our weekly level 10 meetings. And with those, I'll have those kind of in each division. So, and I do those on Monday. We just have them be an hour. I think the book suggests an hour and a half, but we just have ours as an hour. So Mondays are kind of like my touch point when I'm taking the pulse of everything. We have a weekly scorecard with our top metrics. We pretty much follow the EOS model to a T there. All the issues get tossed into IDS for those meetings. So I'm not dealing with that throughout the rest of the week. So just kind of, frees my mind so I get clarity on other things. So Mondays are my time when I do that. So I probably spend, 4 or 5 hours on calls on Mondays, touching all the different people in all the different industries that I'm in. And then the rest of the week, I mainly spend, looking for acquisitions, or if we're taking some strategic initiatives in some of those brands to really grow them, then I'll focus on them the rest of the week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we mentioned EOS earlier, and we do it here. We use a software. I think it's 90.io, which is kind of that level 10 meeting you mentioned once a week. Yeah, we do the 90-minute one, but it walks us through like, okay, you're done with 5 minutes talking about, scorecard, move on to the next section. And it definitely keeps us on track. So we, and we do our quarterly setting up our rocks and things like that. So
yep, we do the same thing.
Yep. Wait, are a lot of those companies, because it sounds like you put that in place for these companies that probably never had it before. Is that kind of a change?
Yeah, none of the companies have ever had it before, and it's really a big wave of relief for them because it just reduces the emails and the text messages. So, like, I tell my managers and myself, like, we don't email each other, like, unless something is super urgent. But whenever we do, we follow up with the text because it's a very rare instance. Yeah. We use a software called Notion. I don't know if you've heard that. I use that to kind of manage the company, and we also kind of integrate our level 10 meetings and IDS in there. Yeah. So I tell the managers, rather than emailing me on a Thursday with an issue, just log on to Notion and drop it in IDS, and then we'll just organically get to it at our meeting next week. So anyways, I've never brought a company that has had that system, and every time I've done it, it's always been a blessing, and the team has really appreciated it.
Do you rate the people analyzer? Do you use that at these companies and try to figure out, who's our rock stars and who aren't?
Yes, I had some challenge implementing the people analyzer because, so for example, if we're going to do the people analyzer, we want to give it out to the staff to kind of all rate each other. It's a delicate balance. Like, I need to make it as easy for the staff to do as possible on their own in private, so they don't have to worry about anybody seeing their score. Then they have to submit the scores anonymously, and then we have to kind of compile it to get averages. So I've struggled a little bit trying to find like a software or something that just does that. If you know of anything, please let me know. So we do have the people analyzer, and we do use it, especially if we feel like people aren't really a culture fit or whatever. It's kind of a way to communicate with them in a tangible way. Because if you're trying to say like a soft skill isn't quite there, it's sometimes hard to define that in black and white. And the people analyzer definitely helps us do that. But I'm not super happy with our solution. That's something I am trying to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, we're a smaller company. We don't actually have our own people analyze themselves. We came up with our core values. I think we had 5 of them. We read it, or actually I read it to the team when we first did this. Like, here are our core values. And it's interesting the way we came up with them is we looked at our best employees and tried to figure out, what makes them our best employees? What are the values that they have? Created those values. And then when we get together quarterly, we don't do this at our level 10, but when we get together quarterly, we actually, as a management team, we look at all our employees and rate them plus minus, or
right,
plus minus, and then if somebody's got the 2 minuses, according to EOS, it's like they're toxic, right? So you don't, either you get rid of them or make them a better team member, and
right.
We try to make them better, but many times there's a reason why they're not. They have the minuses. They probably have to go. So unfortunately, so
100%. Yeah.
We mentioned earlier in our prep call, like you focus on more or less the rock star, the really good ones, and don't spend a lot of time on the ones that are toxic. You just kind of have to get rid of them. So it sounds like
right.
So Yeah, so I think it's a great system. It sounds awesome that you instill it in every business you purchase, and I'm sure the management team likes it, right? Because they never had anything like that before.
Oh yeah, they like it.
Yeah,
It allows them to just focus on what they love about their job versus all the bureaucracy or the stuff behind the scenes. They just get to go out and
yeah.
do what they love. So it's very nice.
So, how many, just from a purchaser of companies, how many companies would you like to have in the long run? It sounds like you're constantly looking, right? Can you foresee a portfolio of 20, 30 companies that you own? Or is there a
Oh yeah,
finite
definitely.
amount? Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I feel, obviously I don't know what I don't know, and I keep hitting, glass ceilings as I've expanded, and I run into new problems that I never foresaw. I mean, I love that though. I love the problem solving and figuring that out. So yeah, I feel very confident I could scale up to 20, 30, 40 companies. To me though, it's not like a game of how many companies. I mean, if I
sure.
could find one company that's making 2 million in income, and if I could grow it to make 20 million in income, I'd be fine with just one company for a very long time. So to me, no, I don't have a goal with the quantities of companies. I just want to keep expanding the empire. I've had a lot of people who've been loyal with me for a long time. I love watching them rise. I love learning about new industries. It just kind of increases my worldview, and it's just a more exciting and fulfilling way to live. Like aside from the money. I mean, obviously money is important, but to answer your question, I don't have a specific number that I'm shooting for, but I don't like I have plenty of time, so I don't foresee myself reaching like a breaking point anytime in the near future. And I feel confident that I'd be able to figure it out and ways to systematize it, so it wouldn't get too out of hand.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds like you probably would need more team members too if as you start to grow, just in having more companies under in your portfolio of companies. And
Yeah, and like right now, one of my biggest problems is I've got a lot of employees or team members who have been with me for a very long time, and they're arguably overqualified for their current position. So I'm trying to grow so I can elevate them up, and it's like I've got the talent and the people and all that kind of stuff. I just need the opportunities now to kind of unleash all that on. So that's my big focus.
could you see, is there any, like, I guess I'll call it cross pollination, where you can take someone who may be a great manager at, one company and say, I could use your skills over here to help me because we have an issue, whatever it is, over here in this other company that I want to use you on. Does that ever happen, or can you see that happening? Yeah.
It hasn't happened much as of uh, as of recently. Like I can't think
Yeah.
of any time when I've done that, but it absolutely could happen in the future. Because like one thing I've learned is like with running businesses, they do different things, but at the end of the day, a business is a business, and managing people is managing
Sure.
people. People, emotions are emotions, and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely see that could be something that would happen in the future, just because of the way there's the talent pools have been going, the opportunities. I haven't had to do that yet, but
Yeah.
I definitely could see that happening.
Yeah. Because I could think of, let's say, a company that has a great salesperson, a sales manager,
Right.
and another one you have maybe lagging in sales, or maybe they just have a less sophisticated team because they're homegrown and they just, you want to scale it, but they're probably not, they're at that limit where you could probably take this person and go, okay, I need you over here for a little bit, just kind of like help me out, figure out the best system and elevate the current members, and then go back, type of thing. So I could
Right.
actually see some opportunities there, it sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, is there certain companies that we talked about manufacturing a little while ago, that you will like not even go near? Like, you just kind of like, that's just not my thing. I don't even, you know, I don't want to venture.
Probably, and I'm always open to changing my mind. Open mindedness is one of my core values. So I don't like to have a closed mind, but just as a general broad brushstroke, probably no tech companies. I'm really looking for those boring businesses, those businesses
Yeah.
that have been around for 20, 30 years, like, companies that make chewing gum or something like that. Like, no matter how fast our internet speeds go or what kind of new electronic gadgets comes out, chewing gum was probably not going to change all that often. So like, I just like kind of, boring businesses that are under the radar, that are very essential and necessary. So nothing super tech related. Nothing that's super capital intensive. So probably a lot of manufacturing things that you're constantly replacing machines and things like that.
Right.
Nothing that requires like a super intelligent scientist to like develop chemicals in a lab or anything like that. That's, again, it's a bit beyond me. So yeah, nothing with a lot of like research and development costs or things like that. So I
Yeah.
don't know if that answered your question or narrowed it down, but that's
Yeah,
kind of where my mind goes when you say that.
it's almost like that book One Up on Wall Street, he used to say, go after like in the stock market, he would go after like ADP or something, like none of these like real sexy companies. It was just like boring processing companies or something like that. And that's where the big increase in stock prices were for years. It's probably the same with companies like this. They're stable, they're boring. Nobody's trying to get in and, disrupt the market,
Exactly. Competition is less. It's easier. And I mean, I don't know. I love it. It's a lot of fun. I love operating in there.
Yeah, well, that's great. But how did you actually get involved in, you mentioned you have an engineering background. So how'd you get involved in doing this type of work?
So I went to school at Kettering University in Flint, Michigan, and I got my degree in electrical engineering. And at Kettering, it's a co-op school. So the way it works is you go to school for 3 months, then you work for 3 months as an engineer, then you go to school for 3 months, work for 3 months, on and off. So I was fortunate enough to get engineering experience while I was in school. And I remember one day I was talking to my coworkers, and I asked them, like, what was the most exciting part about their job? And they said that they really enjoy that twice a year they get to have Blue Jean Fridays, which is when they get to wear blue jeans to work. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, I'm like, okay, there's got to be more to life than this. Like, this doesn't sound like that's the highlight of what we got going on. That this doesn't sound very exciting. So I kind of got a bad taste in my mouth really early on for engineering. I love the logic problem solvingness of it, but it's just not that. So I've always been into entrepreneurship. So I decided to kind of go down more that route. So shortly after I graduated in 2008, I actually, the day after I graduated, I put in my 2-week notice with my engineering job. So I worked as an engineer with my degree for 2 full weeks. And then I became a franchise consultant, and just things kept going from there.
Yeah. And it sounds like you like franchises, right? Because they're already kind of existing. And or will you look at any business that's not a franchise? It doesn't matter? Or
I'm actually trying to focus on non-franchises. So everything that I've done has been franchises, and a good majority of the businesses that I have now, I actually started from the ground up. Again, they're franchising, so I'm not smart enough to come up with the concept, but I built them from the ground up. Mm-hmm. But I'm really looking for things that are not in franchising. Franchising is definitely beneficial for like startup entrepreneurs because you're buying into a system. But a downside with franchising is if a franchise is any good, you're going to hear about it, you're going to know about it. But if you know about it, a bunch of other people know about it. So then all the territory is going to get gobbled up. And a lot of franchisors, they don't get very big protected territories. So cannibalism becomes a real thing. Even if you do have a franchise that gives you bigger protected territories, other companies are going to start franchising in that space. So it's kind of like the fast casual pizza places, like those caught on, like wildfire a while ago. And now it's like, whenever I go to any kind of major intersection, there's 3 competing ones in that space. So with the franchising model, it's just very competitive. It's really hard to find a good concept. By the time you find a good concept, almost all the territory is gone, so that you can only go so far in it. So again, I love franchising. That's pretty much everything that I have now. So you can definitely make it in that. But when I'm focusing more on acquisitions, I really like to find something that's not a franchise, something that's just under the radar, just a nice, like I said, stable business, like a family-owned business that's been running for 40 years. The owner's looking to retire, and they either, they don't have kids, or the kids don't want it. They don't really have a succession plan, and they want just like a nice neighborhood investor like myself who will take care of their legacy. So I'm really trying to get out of franchising for that reason, but I'm not opposed to it. So if someone's looking to sell a franchise business, I would definitely look at it.
And how do you like to structure the deals? Is there seller financing? Do you have your own financing? Earnouts? Do you have a kind of a way you do it, or is every deal has been different?
Every deal is different. I've done all cash. I've done just myself with bank financing. I've done seller financing. I've done earnout when like the seller felt like the business was going up and was going to make more money than they had in the past. Yep. So, but I don't want to risk paying for future performance that wouldn't actually come, but I also didn't want to shortchange the seller and pay them less than it's worth. So basically, we came up with a price that was based on the company's previous earnings, and then they got a little earnout provision if sales increase, they got more. So I've done them all. And what's important for me, like I don't look just to get the best price. I mean, obviously I don't want to overpay for something, but I would rather, pay more than possible and have it be a fair deal for both the seller and myself. So we have a positive relationship after the deal is closed. That's kind of the way that I like to work. So that's why I'm very open-minded to deals that work for both the seller and myself versus just what I'm looking for.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. Yeah. And Are you a member of any kind of group, like for your own professional development and learning these type of things, whether it's purchasing businesses, selling, what structuring? Do you rely on any kind of Vistage, Provises? I'm a member of EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. Is there something that you kind of are part of, or are you kind of at this point been kind of learning as you go, right? You've been doing this for now, how many years now? 12 years?
14.
14,
Yeah.
14? Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, great question. So up to now, the answer is no. I haven't been part of any organization. I read all the time. I love reading and just networking and just my relationship with other business owners. I'm currently in the process of applying for EO. You mentioned that earlier, as well as YPO. So I'm currently going through the process of both of those organizations. I do want to join an organization like that because I feel like it's very beneficial. I just haven't done it as of yet.
Yeah. I mean, whatever group you join, I think they all have benefits, and you don't feel like you're kind of alone out there. You can bang ideas off other business owners because, like you mentioned earlier, every business essentially does, not that they sell or have the same product or service, but the business runs pretty much the same. There's cash flow, there's receivables, there's payables, there's sales.
Right.
So, yeah, and there's nothing out there that hasn't been solved or someone else hasn't confronted the same issue. So it's refreshing when you bring up something like as I mentioned, EO. You bring up something in a meeting and someone goes, yeah, I had the same exact experience, or here's what that's helped me. And you're like, okay. And you're constantly taking notes, and whether it's reading a different book that somebody brought up or a podcast that somebody mentioned, like you have to listen to this person. And, that's what kind of happens with us. So,
I'm very much looking forward to joining one of those groups for the reasons you mentioned.
Yeah. So what do you see, like, opportunities for the future? Is there any kind of companies you're kind of currently looking at that you're like thinking on? You don't have to mention obviously names or anything, but just any opportunities you're thinking of now that you're looking at?
One of my partners and I were looking at a company. They, I have a NDA, so I can't, disclose too much information. Yeah. But basically, they sell and support different machines and devices that like grocery stores use and things like that. Something like that, I love it because grocery stores are probably going to be here in some way, shape or form. And, 10, 15, 20 years, or we're going to have to buy our produce and meat somehow. So, so it just kind of seems like, future proof. It's also under the radar. There's just not a lot of spotlight on that. It's not really tech, it uses machines, but it's not like, heavy software development, things like that. And, the current owners, they've owned it for over 40 years. So it's been around for a while. Very stable earnings. And I'm actually very, very excited about the opportunity. So we're still pretty early on, so we'll see how it goes. But overall, I'm pretty excited for that.
Awesome. And just let's switch over to just talk about you briefly. Tell me about yourself. Are you from Michigan? You mentioned you went to school in Flint, I think, right? Is that what you said? Yep. So just a little bit maybe about your background.
Yeah, I'm born and raised in Michigan, and I grew up in Milford, which is like kind of in a suburb of Detroit. And I went to school at Kettering University up in Flint with my electrical engineering degree. And pretty much right out of that, I got into business ownership. The first business I opened was a Disc Replay, which is a store. It's a retail store that buys and sells video games, movies, and electronics.
Okay.
And this was in 2009 during the Great Recession. So a lot of people were losing money. It was pretty intense, a lot of economic hard times. But I'm a video game nerd, and this is basically a store where you can sell your games and electronics and things like that. So I help people get cash during the hard time. You can also buy stuff at a discount. So it was really good for the recession. Yep. That was my first business. I actually opened it in Flint, and things have been going well.
Nice. And not married, still single, just enjoying life.
I am dating someone, my girlfriend Kelly, and it's actually our 9-year anniversary today. So we're going to dinner to this to celebrate. As of right now, though, I'm not married.
Cool. Well, just because you're a pretty young guy, so just leads me to the question of when you're going into these well-established businesses with an owner who's retiring. So obviously they're 40 years older than you, give or take. How is that from a reception of the current management team when they see this young guy come in, like, hey, he's going to be our new boss, so to speak?
Right.
Have you felt that feeling, like they're kind of looking at you like, what does this kid know, and how can he help us, type of thing? Is that something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've definitely experienced it before, and I think I'm pretty good at navigating it. So, like if I mentioned when I first take over a business, the first month that I spend, I really focus on the team and having one-on-ones with them and things like
Yeah.
that. So a lot of times I'll just address the elephant in the room up front. So if I'm meeting with someone and if they're 30 years older than me, they've been doing this for a while, I'll sit down with them and be like, hey, so obviously you know infinitely more than I do about this industry. I'm very new to it, so I'm going to rely a lot on you. Um, what are some things that I can do to earn your trust, or what are some things that I can do to help make your job easier? And like, how can we work together? And one of my other core values is radical honesty and transparency. And I got this from Ray Dalio with how he runs his company Bridgewater. But I just love being radically honest and radically transparent with people. So with these team members, will say, if you think I'm doing a bad job, just tell me that I'm doing a bad job. And I don't want you to sugarcoat it and say, hey, you could be doing better or something like that. Like, no, just tell me I'm doing a bad job, and I'm not going to review it as an attack. Hopefully you don't mean it as an attack, and we can talk through it. So I really kind of paved the way for just upfront and honest communication. So it's not like I enjoy when team members disagree with me. I enjoy a healthy amount of conflict, and I encourage them, especially if they're more senior than I am and they know about the business. It's like, hey, you're the expert here. I kind of view my role as more as a servant to help you and support you in your job, so your job is easier. So I'm really good at tech things that can make your job easier, so you can have a much more enjoyable time. But I'm not going to come here trying to tell you how to do your job any better than you already know how to do it. So I know I kind of rambled there a little bit, but I just have very open conversations like that, and that definitely builds a pretty strong bridge of trust. For some people, they just don't want to work for somebody as young as I am, and that's fine. But for most people, though, we're able to talk through it and have a really good working relationship.
No, that's great. Yeah, because I assume there would be the elephant in the room where some gray-haired person who's been in the business for years and maybe was the right-hand person of the guy or the woman who's selling the business. They couldn't buy it. They just weren't in that position. They have a young person coming in that's buying this thing. It's like, they don't know anything about this business.
Right.
It's nice that you confront it right away. And like you said, a healthy confrontation, conflict. I mean, sometimes it's needed. You got to get through it, and you're better off on the other side, which is good. So,
yeah. I also run my businesses with a very strong sense of collaboration. So I usually don't sit here in my office in front of a spreadsheet and come up with my own corporate goals or whatever, then present them to the staff and say, okay, here it is, go do it. I use collaboration, and I really encourage my team, because again, I'm not that smart. Like if I'm in a bunch of different industries, I can't know everything about every single industry that I'm in. Yes. So with those more senior members, I mean, when I say senior, I just mean people who have experience, not necessarily age. I'll invite them into the table. I'm like, well, where do you guys want to take the company? Like I don't know as good as you do. Like, what are some of your ideas? And I have some ideas I can share, but what do you think should be good goals? And then I also love incentives. So I'll say, what type of incentive could I give you that would really make you take ownership and feel like an owner of the company and have you take part in the success? So you don't feel like you're just working so I can benefit off of all your, sweat, blood, and tears. Like, how can I make you a part of that? So I'm very collaborative, and I love their opinion. I'm good at listening and making them feel heard. And it really quickly, any of those barriers that we have just start to melt away, and we lock arms as team members versus like a boss employee type dynamic.
I do love that you ask them, like, what do I need to, what incentive do I need to give you so that you feel like an owner, or that you have in this whole growth and process. So I don't hear many people ask their employees of that, so I think that's actually great.
Yeah. And to me, it's crazy. Well, I shouldn't say it's crazy, because, for my first 9 years, I didn't do it myself either. And it's so much work to sit here. I mean, I remember I'd have meetings with my business partners, and like, we would spend, like a full week trying to come up with these incentive plans. And we're like, do you think this would motivate them? Do you think this would motivate them? What if we did this? Is this too complicated? Is this too simple? And it's just like, duh, just bring them into the room and say, hey, would this work? If not, what do you think? So when you start asking the team members their opinion and what do they think, like, just as the business owner or manager, I mean, your work is so much easier, and like it goes so much quicker. And then because they're part of that, because they're part of coming up with their incentive or their goals or whatever, they take ownership in it, and they're going to follow that much more intensely than anything you could just present them.
Yeah, and I think different employees or team members will want different things. Like somebody may want more time off, or somebody it's more salary related.
Exactly.
Some are looking for help with benefits, and so one size doesn't fit all. And if you're asking them and they go and they tell you, then you're cutting through all that stuff like you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
and you're customizing a little bit more for those folks. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And then like outside of work, what do you like to do outside of work? Are yeah. Are your video games you said you like?
Yeah, I like.
Yeah.
I love video games. I love reading. One of my passions is writing. I actually just wrote a short story that's like a fictional nonfiction book. I don't know. Have you ever read the book Who Moved My Cheese?
I have not read it. I've heard about it. You're like
Okay.
the second podcast person who's mentioned it. But yes, I definitely, and it's kind of like it's been around a long time, right? Yeah. So.
Yes. So that book, it's like it takes like less than an hour to read. It's a short story, and it's a fictional story about mice in a maze trying to find cheese and things like that. But it's a book that is teaching a lesson on how to deal with change. As humans, a lot of times we resist change, or we get defensive when it comes by. So it's just like a different perspective. And I really like that book. I have my managers read that book. It was a really good book. So I read all the time and I love teaching. So I just wrote a short story that I'm in the process of publishing. That's kind of like that. It's like a fictional nonfiction book, takes less than an hour to read. And it kind of teaches a life lesson in an entertaining way, because I think that we remember stories better than we remember just facts. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So, I mean, to answer your question though, like writing is a pretty big passion of mine.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, I love reading books that are in the form of a story that teach something.
Yeah.
The last one I read was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lucioni, and I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. Hopefully I did. But it was about team members who all had different perspectives on the growth of the company. Right. There were people that were resistant, some that weren't, but it really taught about team management in the form of a story. And it was actually really good because some of the team members in the story left because it just didn't work for them. But it went through that whole process because there was somebody kind of like you that came in as a new president and had to deal with an existing management team that had all different, thoughts on how the company should grow or where it was. Mm-hmm. And great book, actually. It's a business book, but it was a story. And that's what keeps you interested. So,
and what was that called again?
The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Okay. I'll check that out. I'm always looking for good book recommendations. So yeah,
and it's a quick read, and it's really good. It's I won't go into it now, but if I'm wrong on that title, I'll put it in the notes. I'll tell you afterwards. Right. I probably butchered the author's name, but it was good. It's great. That and like Predictable Success, which is not a story, but it talks about the stages, the growth of a company, and how to get it to the predictable success stage. I'm not sure if you have ever read that book, Les McEwen.
I have not, no.
So it's pretty good. It talks about, the growth of a company from the infancy stage where it's like just trying to like get cash. And obviously you're not dealing with those type of companies, but like they're just trying to get cash in the door. And then there's like the fun stage, which is, hey, we're rolling, money's coming in, we're getting new clients, everyone's happy, and we're kind of having fun. And then the next stage is what they call the whitewater, where it's like, holy crap, it's like systems are not where they should be. There's all these clients coming in where like things are slipping through the cracks. Customer service isn't that great. We're just kind of fumbling along, and they call it whitewater. Right. And getting through that to what they call predictable success, and how you have to bring in different players. Like at the whitewater stage, you need to bring in more of like a processor, people who are like, we got to get our systems in place, our I's dotted, our T's crossed. Right. Before that, the processor could stifle a company because it's, growing. But it talks about after predictable success, if the person who's like has the visionary leaves, because typically the processor is like, hey, we got to have all these systems, and the visionary is like, you know what, I'm out of here because this is way too systematized for me, and the company can go into a death spiral because the processor runs it, the visionary is gone. So that's a really good book too.
Okay.
So Les McEwen. Cool. Well,
awesome. Well, thank you for the recommendations.
Yeah. So where can people find you if they want to connect outside of the podcast?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way, I would say, is just to come up on LinkedIn, send me a message or connection request.
So it's spelled
Uh,
Nick and then Leja, Leja, right?
yeah, my first name is Nick, Nick. My last name is Leja, Leja.
Okay, cool. And you have various websites for your companies. There's like the Wax Center and Plato's Closet. And,
Yeah, a lot of those are the franchise websites.
Okay.
I'm in the process of actually coming with my own website. So pretty soon, nickleja.com will be a website.
Okay,
Should
cool.
probably be live here in the next like 2 to 3 weeks. Just kind of finishing that up on my end. So that going forward, that'll probably be the best way. But as of right now, just LinkedIn, just looking for Nick Leja in Michigan is probably the fastest way.
So people
If
listening,
you want, you can put a link in the comments so people can click on that.
okay, that'll be cool. And if people are listening and they want to sell and they seem to meet your criteria, they could hopefully connect with you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to hear from people for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pitch what you're kind of looking for one more time, just from a very high level criteria, go for it. What's yours?
Yeah, very, very simply, I'm just looking for simple, easy to understand businesses, nothing super flashy with like the latest technology necessarily. Ideally, family-owned businesses that have been around for at least 10 years with relatively stable earnings. And they're looking for someone who's going to buy their business, who is really going to kind of steward their business and carry on their legacy. I'm a long-term hold investor. I have no plans on selling businesses when I buy them. So yeah, and businesses that are making about 1 to 5 million in owner income. So that's kind of like a really high level view. So if you have a business that somewhat fits that mold, I'd love to hear from you.
So 1 to 5 million, like the owner, what they make, not necessarily the top line, right? The bottom line.
Correct. Yes. Correct. Like net operating income.
People want to, just want to make sure they understand that. So,
yep.
Great. So this has been awesome. I'd love to follow up like in 6 months or a year and see where you're at with
for sure.
Stuff, any new stuff. Hopefully people will connect because it sounds like, you are a great purchaser because you're not looking to flip something. You're looking to carry on a legacy, hopefully. And I think that's awesome. And you got some good ideas. Implementing EOS, I think, is huge. I'm a big proponent of that. So when these companies get that implemented, you typically see them scale, faster than they were. And so, thank you. I want to thank the people who are listening to this or watching this. And hopefully, if you like it, please share it, connect with Nick, tell your friends, and hopefully, you learn something. I did myself. And again, thank you, Nick. And this has been another episode of Leaders Who Scale. And that wraps up another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at leaderswhoscale.com. Leaders Who Scale is sponsored by Siegel Solutions, providing world-class services and cutting-edge tools that help businesses grow and succeed.